They thought they could bully a lawyer. The HOA board sent me a foreclosure notice for my $800,000 lakeside home over a $200 fine. They had no idea I specialized in real estate law, and they had no idea what I'd found buried in their own bylaws. By the time I was done, 3 board members lost their positions, the HOA owed me $60,000, and the president? Well, let me just say, karma works in mysterious ways. Want to know how a small-town tyrant learned you should never mess with someone who reads contracts for a living? My name is Jennifer Morrison, and I bought my dream home in Clearwater Estates in 2019. After 15 years of grinding through law school, brutal associate hours at a corporate firm, and finally making partner, I deserve this. An $800,000 contemporary lake house with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Mitchell, private dock, 3 bedrooms, an office with a view that made contract review almost enjoyable. Clearwater Estates was perfect. 73 homes in a gated community, every single one worth at least $600,000. The kind of place where neighbors actually knew each other, where kids rode bikes in the street because everyone drove slow and careful, where summer evenings meant wine on the dock and watching the sunset paint the lake gold and pink. The HOA seemed reasonable at first. Monthly dues were $250. Not cheap, but they maintained the private beach, the boat launch, the walking trails, and the gorgeous stone entrance with its fountain and seasonal flowers. The neighborhood always looked immaculate. Property values stayed high. I'd reviewed the CC&Rs before buying, covenants, conditions, and restrictions, and they seemed standard. Keep your lawn maintained, no commercial vehicles parked on the street overnight, no permanent structures without architectural approval. Basic stuff. The board was led by Richard Hoffman, late 50s, retired insurance executive. The kind of guy who wore a polo shirt tucked into khakis every single day like it was a uniform. He'd been HOA president for 6 years, which should have been my first red flag. His vice president was Carol Hendricks, a former middle school principal who had apparently never stopped enjoying telling people what to do. The rest of the board, Martin Chen, Susan Rodriguez, and Tom Patterson, mostly just nodded along with whatever Richard said. For the first 3 years, I had 0 problems. I paid my dues on time, kept my property spotless, even volunteered for the neighborhood cleanup day twice. I worked 70 hours weeks at the firm, specializing in real estate litigation and contract disputes. Ironic looking back. My home was my sanctuary, the place I could finally breathe after battling developers, corporations, and bad faith actors all week. My next-door neighbor, Patricia, was a retired teacher in her 70s. We'd have coffee on Saturday mornings when I wasn't buried in work. She'd lived in Clearwater Estate since it was built in 1998. She told me stories about the old days when the HOA was just a few neighbors making sure everyone's trash got picked up and the snow got plowed. Richard changed things, she'd said once, staring into her coffee cup. When he became president, he started treating it like a corporation. Rules for everything. Fines for anything. He likes the power. I laughed it off. Every neighborhood had that guy, right? The one who took things too seriously. I figured, as long as I followed the rules, I'd be fine. I was so wrong. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in June 2023. I was getting ready for a deposition when I saw the letter in my mailbox. Official HOA letterhead. Notice of violation in bold letters across the top. I opened it standing in my driveway, still holding my travel mug of coffee. According to Richard's signature at the bottom, my mailbox was painted the wrong shade of black. It was supposed to be midnight black, SW6255, per the architectural guidelines. Mine was allegedly iron ore, SW7069. I stared at my mailbox. It was black. Just black. I'd touched up the paint 2 months ago because it was chipping. I'd used exterior black paint from Home Depot. I'd never heard of paint colors having official designations with numbers. The fine was $50, due in 30 days. I almost laughed. This had to be a joke. But when I checked the architectural guidelines on the HOA website that night, there it was, page 47. All mailboxes shall be painted midnight black SW6255 Sherwin-Williams or approved equivalent. Approved equivalent. Those were weasel words. I knew weasel words. I dealt with them every day in contracts. Approved equivalent meant Richard could reject anything he wanted and claim it wasn't equivalent. But it was $50, the cost of one billable hour of my time. I wasn't going to fight over $50. I just repaint the mailbox with the exact paint they wanted and move on. Except when I went to Sherwin-Williams that weekend, the paint guy looked at me like I was crazy. "You're the fourth person from Clearwater this month," he said. "Your HOA president comes in here every few weeks and buys a few cans. I think he's checking people's mailboxes." That's when I realized this wasn't about the mailbox.
I repainted my mailbox with midnight black SW6255. Took me 30 minutes. I submitted photographic proof to the HOA office email with the paint can label visible showing the exact product code. Paid my $50 fine online. Done. Over. Back to my life. 2 weeks later, another letter. Notice of violation. My lawn was apparently 1/4 inch too tall. Maximum permitted grass height was 3 inches. Mine was measured at 3.25 inches. The fine was $75. I went outside and looked at my lawn. It looked perfect. I had a professional lawn service that came every Thursday. It was Wednesday. My grass was maybe pushing 3 inches in a few spots. 1/4 inch? Someone had measured my grass with a ruler. I called the lawn service and asked them to come a day early. Then I called the HOA office, got voicemail, left a message asking for clarification on how grass height was being measured and by whom, never got a call back. Paid the $75 fine. Now I was $125 into this nonsense. The next violation came in August. My front porch light was on past 10 p.m., which apparently violated the light pollution section of the community guidelines. Never mind that I worked until midnight most nights and needed my porch light on for safety. Never mind that half the neighborhood had porch lights on at all hours. $100 fine. I started documenting everything. Took photos of every other house with porch lights on past 10, took timestamp photos, built a spreadsheet. Lawyer mode activated. In September, I got cited for having a decorative wreath on my door that wasn't seasonally appropriate. It was a fall wreath with leaves and berries. But apparently, fall decorations couldn't go up until September 15th, and I'd hung mine on September 12th. How did they know? Richard had apparently driven by on his compliance check. $75 fine? That's when I started asking around the neighborhood. Patricia next door was horrified. "Oh, honey, Richard's been doing this to anyone who doesn't kiss his ring at meetings. The Johnsons down the street got hit with 8 violations in 3 months. They sold their house and moved. The Patels fought back and ended up spending $4,000 in legal fees before they gave up." I attended the next HOA board meeting, held the third Tuesday of every month in the community clubhouse. About 20 homeowners showed up, which, according to Patricia, was unusually high. Word was spreading about Richard's enforcement spree. Richard sat at the head table, with his board members flanking him like generals. He ran the meeting like a court proceeding, recognized speakers only if they followed Robert's Rules of Order, cut people off mid-sentence if they went off topic. When one homeowner complained about getting fined for having their trash cans visible from the street on a non-collection day, Richard smiled. "The rules are clearly stated in Section 7, subsection C of our governing documents. Trash receptacles must be stored in garages or behind privacy fencing when not in active use for collection. Ignorance of the rules is not an excuse." Next item. I raised my hand. I'd like to discuss the recent increase in violation notices and fines. It seems like enforcement has become overly aggressive and potentially selective. Richard's smile never wavered. "And you are?" "Jennifer Morrison, 847 Lakeshore Drive." "Ah, yes, Ms. Morrison, I have your file right here. 4 violations in 3 months. You know, if you simply followed the rules like the rest of our compliant homeowners, you wouldn't have any issues." My jaw clenched. I am following the rules. But when you're measuring grass with a ruler and citing people for having decorations up 3 days early, you're not enforcing rules. You're looking for reasons to fine people. The room went silent. Carol Hendricks leaned forward. Ms. Morrison? Are you accusing this board of acting in bad faith? I'm suggesting that enforcement should be reasonable and consistent. Are you measuring everyone's grass or just certain homeowners? Richard stood up, actually stood up. This meeting is for addressing community business, not personal grievances. If you have a complaint about a violation, you can file a written appeal per Section 12 of our bylaws. Your speaking time is over. I wanted to argue, but 20 years of courtroom experience taught me when to retreat and regroup. I sat down, but I noticed something. Other homeowners were nodding. A few gave me thumbs up as I walked out. The violations continued. In October, my house numbers were improperly mounted. They were supposed to be centered on the door frame. Mine were allegedly 1 inch off center. $50 fine. In November, I had unauthorized landscaping modifications because I'd planted 3 hostas in my front garden bed without architectural committee approval. $150 fine. In December, my holiday decorations went up on December 1st, but holiday decorations may only be displayed between December 5th and January 5th. $100 fine. I was now into this for over $700. But here's the thing about being a lawyer who specializes in contracts and real estate litigation. I don't just get mad. I get meticulous. I started reading, not skimming, actually reading every single page of the HOA's governing documents. The original CCRs from 1998, the amendments passed in 2005, 2011, and 2018, the architectural guidelines, the rules and regulations, the bylaws, the budget reports, the meeting minutes going back 15 years. And that's when I found it. Actually, I found several things, but one thing in particular made me smile for the first time in months. Richard Hoffman had made a mistake, a big one, the kind of mistake that could cost him everything.
I cleared my schedule for an entire weekend, told my assistant to reschedule everything non-urgent, ordered Thai food, made a pot of coffee, and spread every single HOA document across my dining room table. My specialty in real estate law isn't just contracts. It's finding the holes, the contradictions, the places where poorly drafted language creates loopholes big enough to drive a truck through. Developers hire me to find problems before they become lawsuits. Buyers hire me to find reasons to walk away from bad deals. I've made partner by being better at reading the fine print than anyone else. And HOA documents? They're usually a disaster, written by volunteer board members who aren't lawyers, amended over years by different people with different agendas, rarely reviewed by actual attorneys. They're contradictory, vague, and full of unenforceable provisions. Clearwater Estates was no exception. First discovery, the Architectural Committee. According to the bylaws, all architectural modifications, improvements, or changes to the external appearance of any property required approval from the Architectural Committee. The committee was supposed to consist of 3 members appointed by the board for 2-year terms. I checked the meeting minutes. The last Architectural Committee appointment was in 2019. Those terms expired in 2021. There was no current Architectural Committee. Richard had been unilaterally approving or denying everything himself. Every single architectural violation he'd issued in the past 2 years was invalid. No committee meant no authority to enforce architectural rules. Second discovery, the fine schedule. The bylaws stated that fines could only be assessed according to the published fine schedule approved by majority vote of the board. I found the fine schedule from 2018. Maximum fine for any first-time violation was $25. Richard had been charging $50, $75, even $150 for first violations. Every fine he'd issued above $25 was invalid. Third discovery, the big one,
This was the beautiful part. According to Section 15.3 of the bylaws, any homeowner with outstanding violations or unpaid fines exceeding $500 for more than 90 days could have a lien placed on their property. If unpaid for 12 months, the HOA could initiate foreclosure proceedings. But Section 8.7 stated that all fines and violations must be subject to a formal hearing before the board, with no less than 30 days written notice due the homeowner before any collection action may be taken. Richard had never given anyone formal hearings. He just sent violation notices and demanded payment. Every single lien he'd filed in the past 3 years was invalid because he'd skipped the required hearing process. And guess who had liens filed against their property? 11 homeowners, including the Patels, who'd spent $4,000 fighting back, including the Johnsons, who'd sold their house and moved, including 3 homeowners whose properties had actually been foreclosed on and sold. Holy shit. I sat back and stared at my dining room wall. Richard Hoffman hadn't just been aggressive. He'd been running an illegal operation. He'd been using invalid fines and improper procedures to harass homeowners. And he'd actually foreclosed on 3 families based on fake legal authority. This wasn't HOA overreach. This was fraud. But here's what made me smile. I was now at $725 in fines. If Richard hit me with one more violation, I'd cross the $500 threshold, with the required 90 days having passed on my earlier fines. He'd probably try to file a lien against my property, and when he did, I'd have him. I spent Sunday drafting documents. As a real estate litigator, I knew exactly what I needed. First, a detailed legal memorandum outlining every violation of the HOA's own governing documents. Second, a demand letter to the board requiring them to rescind all my fines and cease further violations. Third, a notice of intent to file a lawsuit for harassment, violations of the HOA bylaws, and breach of fiduciary duty. But I also drafted something else, something Richard wouldn't see coming. A petition to call a special meeting of all homeowners to vote on removing the entire board. According to Section 4.2 of the bylaws, any 20% of homeowners could petition for a special meeting. Clearwater Estates had 73 homes. I needed 15 signatures. And based on what I'd seen at the board meeting, I could get that in a week. Monday morning, I started knocking on doors. Not random doors, strategic doors. I'd made a list of every homeowner who'd been hit with violations in the past year based on what I could find in meeting minutes and by talking to Patricia. My pitch was simple. Richard Hoffman has been operating outside his legal authority. Every fine he's assessed is invalid. Every lien he's filed is illegal, and I can prove it. I'm a real estate litigator, and I'm going to take him down. Want to help? By Wednesday, I had 23 signatures. On Thursday, I went to Patricia's house. She answered the door with flour on her hands and a worried expression. "Jennifer, honey, you need to be careful. Richard doesn't take kindly to people challenging him." "Patricia, did you know he foreclosed on 3 homes using invalid procedures?" She face went pale. "What?" I showed her my research, showed her the bylaws, showed her the evidence. By the time I finished, she was crying. Those poor families. The Kowalskis had to move in with their daughter. They lost everything. "Not if I can help it," I said. "They might have legal claims to sue the HOA for wrongful foreclosure. But first, we need to remove Richard and fix this board." Patricia signed my petition. Then she called her friend Margaret. Then Margaret called someone else. By Friday, I had 31 signatures, over 40% of the neighborhood. I submitted the petition to the HOA office on Friday afternoon. Certified mail with return receipt requested. Per the bylaws, the board had to hold the special meeting within 30 days of receiving a valid petition. I also sent copies to every board member's home address, with my legal memorandum attached, and a cover letter that made my intentions clear. Either you voluntarily rescind all invalid fines and resign from the board, or I will see you in court. Choose wisely. Then, I waited. Richard called me Saturday morning. I let it go to voicemail. He called again Saturday afternoon. Voicemail. He called Sunday evening and actually left a message. Ms. Morrison, this is Richard Hoffman, HOA president. I've received your correspondence. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'd like to invite you to meet with the board Tuesday evening to discuss your concerns. I'm sure we can reach an amicable resolution. Amicable resolution, translation, let me bully you in private into withdrawing your petition. I texted back, all communications should be in writing per my previous letter. See you at the special meeting. The special meeting was scheduled for December 15th, 28 days away. Richard had to know he was cornered, but he had one move left. If he could somehow discredit me before the meeting, or if he could make me drop the petition, he'd survive. And the only way to do that was to escalate. On December 1st, I received a certified letter. Notice of lien filing and foreclosure intent. According to Richard, my outstanding fines now totaled $975. I had 30 days to pay in full, or they would initiate foreclosure proceedings on my $800,000 home. I read the letter twice. Then I actually laughed out loud. Richard had just walked into the trap. I could have responded immediately, could have hit back with both barrels. But 20 years of litigation taught me something important. Timing matters. Let your opponent commit fully before you strike. Make sure they're so far out on the limb that they can't climb back. So I waited for exactly 2 weeks. Let Richard think I was panicking. Let him think maybe I was scrambling to find the money, or looking for a lawyer, or preparing to cave. I spent those 2 weeks doing something else, building my case into a nuclear weapon. I contacted every homeowner who'd been fined in the past 3 years, sent formal letters introducing myself and offering free legal consultation. 11 people responded. I documented everything, every invalid fine, every missed hearing, every procedural violation. I also did something Richard never expected. I requested all financial records of the HOA for the past 5 years. As a homeowner in good standing, I had that right under Section 10.2 of the bylaws. The HOA had to provide them within 10 business days. When the records arrived, I found the fourth smoking gun. Richard had been depositing fine money into a separate account, an account that wasn't listed in the HOA's annual budget reports, an account that had accumulated $47,000 over 3 years, an account that had regular transfers to consulting fees for RH Consulting Services. RH Consulting Services, Richard Hoffman's initials. He'd been fining homeowners with invalid violations and funneling the money to his own consulting company. It wasn't just incompetence or power tripping, it was embezzlement. I took everything to a colleague who specialized in white-collar crime. "Jennifer," he said, whistling low, "this is prosecutable. The AG would love this case." "I want him gone first," I said. "Then we can talk criminal charges." On December 14th, the day before the special meeting, I filed my response to the lien notice. 47 pages. Every violation of the bylaws documented, every invalid fine itemized, every piece of evidence attached as exhibits. I sent copies to every homeowner in Clearwater Estates, all 73 homes, certified mail. I also sent a copy to the county recorder's office with a formal challenge to every lien Richard had filed in the past 3 years. And I sent a copy to the state attorney general's office with a cover letter suggesting they might want to investigate potential fraud. The special meeting was at 7 p.m. in the community clubhouse. I arrived at 6:30. The parking lot was already packed. I'd expected maybe 30 or 40 homeowners. There were at least 60 cars. When I walked into the clubhouse, every chair was filled. People were standing along the walls. Patricia waved to me from the front row. She'd saved me a seat. Richard sat at the head table looking like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Carol and the other board members looked shock-struck. They'd clearly seen my filing. They knew what was coming. At exactly 7 p.m., Richard gavelled the meeting to order. His hand shook.
This special meeting has been called by petition of homeowners to discuss certain allegations regarding board operations. Before we begin, I want to assure everyone that this board has always acted in the best interests of the community. Any procedural irregularities were honest mistakes, and I stood up. Point of order. This meeting was called to vote on removing the current board for violations of fiduciary duty, breach of the governing documents, and potential fraud. We don't need speeches. We need a vote. Richard's face went red. Miss Morrison, you don't have standing to... Actually, I do. Section 4.2 gives petitioners the right to control the agenda of any special meeting they call. The petition specifically requested a vote on board removal, so let's vote. A man in the back stood up. Jim Patterson, a retired accountant who'd been fined $300 for unauthorized tree trimming. I second Miss Morrison's motion. Let's vote. The room erupted in agreement. People started chanting, "Vote! Vote! Vote!" Richard looked at the other board members. Carol was staring at her hands. Martin Chen looked like he wanted to disappear. Susan Rodriguez was crying. Tom Patterson had already stood up and walked away from the table. "Fine," Richard said. "We'll vote. All in favor of removing the current board, say aye." The room erupted with ayes. It wasn't even close. Maybe 5 people abstained. Everyone else wanted them gone. Opposed? Richard asked weakly. Silence. The motion passes, I said. The current board is removed effective immediately. Per the bylaws, we now need to appoint an interim board to serve until the annual meeting in March. Patricia stood up. I nominate Jennifer Morrison as interim president. Another wave of support. I was elected unanimously, along with 4 other homeowners I'd worked with over the past month. Normal people. People who'd been victims of Richard's schemes. People who just wanted a functional HOA that actually served the community. Richard started gathering his papers. He looked broken, defeated. He didn't even look at me as he walked toward the door. Mr. Hoffman, one more thing. He stopped, but didn't turn around. You have 5 business days to return all money in the RH Consulting Services account to the HOA's general fund, all $47,000. If you don't, I'm filing a police report for embezzlement. Do we have an understanding? Now he turned. His face was gray. You can't prove that. I held up a folder. Bank records, transfer logs, invoices for consulting services that were never rendered. Want to test me in court? I'll win. And then you won't just lose the money, you'll lose your freedom. He left without another word. Carol and the other board members followed him like zombies. The remaining homeowners erupted in cheers. People hugged me, shook my hand. One woman actually cried on my shoulder. He tried to foreclose on us last year. We had to refinance our house to pay his fake fines. You just saved us. The interim board met for 2 hours after everyone left. We had a lot to fix. Our first action was simple. Rescind every violation notice and fine issued in the past 3 years. Return all money collected from invalid fines. Release all liens. Send formal apology letters to every homeowner who'd been affected. Second action, hire an actual attorney to review and rewrite the HOA's governing documents so they were legal, clear, and enforceable. Third action, establish real oversight, real architectural committee with term limits, real hearing procedures for violations, real transparency in finances. By midnight, I drove home exhausted, but satisfied. My phone was blowing up with text messages from grateful neighbors, my house was still mine, and Richard Hoffman's reign of terror was over. But I wasn't done yet.
Richard returned the $47,000 within 3 days. Wire transfer to the HOA account. No note, no apology, just the money. I handed the evidence to the state attorney general anyway, not out of revenge, because the Kowalskis and the other families who'd lost their homes deserved justice. The AG opened an investigation in January. Last I heard, Richard was looking at multiple felony charges for fraud, embezzlement, and filing false liens. But that wasn't the most satisfying part.
In February, I did something I'd been planning since the beginning. I contacted every homeowner who'd been foreclosed on or forced to sell because of Richard's illegal fines. I offered to represent them pro bono in lawsuits against Richard personally and the HOA for wrongful foreclosure and damages. The Kowalskis were first to sign on. They'd lost a $600,000 home over $1,500 in invalid fines. The HOA's insurance company took one look at my evidence and settled immediately. $400,000, enough for them to buy a new home and have money left over. The Johnsons settled for $280,000. The Patel family got $350,000. In total, my lawsuits cost Richard and the HOA's insurance carrier $1.2 million. Richard's homeowner's insurance tried to deny coverage because he'd been acting fraudulently. Last I heard, he'd had to sell his own home in Clearwater Estates to cover his share of the settlements. Carol Hendricks resigned from the community entirely and moved to Arizona. Martin Chen issued a public apology and actually seemed genuinely remorseful. Susan Rodriguez had apparently been terrified of Richard and was just going along with everything. Tom Patterson claimed he barely paid attention at board meetings. The March annual meeting was packed again. We held elections for a permanent board. I didn't run. I'd done what I needed to do, and I had no interest in running an HOA long term. A great slate of normal, reasonable people were elected. People who understood that HOAs exist to maintain property values and community standards, not to terrorize homeowners. The new board implemented everything we'd planned: real committees with term limits, transparent finances published monthly online, a hearing process for any violation with actual due process, and a new rule: any board member who issued more than 10 violations in a single year would be automatically reviewed for removal. The violations stopped. The harassment stopped. Clearwater Estates became what it was supposed to be, a beautiful community where people enjoyed living. As for my $725 in fines, the new board refunded every penny, with interest. But the real justice came in April. I was sitting on my dock, finally enjoying a Saturday morning without legal drama, when Patricia came walking down with coffee and muffins. "Did you see?" she asked, grinning. "See what?" She handed me her phone. Local news article. Former HOA President Richard Hoffman indicted on 23 counts of fraud and embezzlement. I read the article twice. The Attorney General had done their homework. Richard was facing up to 15 years in prison if convicted on all counts. They'd found evidence of similar schemes at 2 other HOA communities where he'd previously served on boards. This wasn't just about Clearwater Estates. Richard had been running this con for over a decade. "There's more," Patricia said. She scrolled down to comments. Dozens of people from other neighborhoods sharing their own Richard Hoffman horror stories. People he'd harassed, fined, and pushed out of their homes. The AG's office had set up a hotline for victims. "You didn't just save our neighborhood," Patricia said quietly. "You saved a lot of people." We sat in silence for a moment, watching the morning sun sparkle on the lake. I finally said, "You know what the best part is? He could have just left me alone. I would have paid my dues, followed the rules, and never caused any trouble. But he had to push, had to target a lawyer who specializes in contracts and real estate litigation, had to try to foreclose on my home over $200. Patricia laughed. Pride comes before the fall. I raised my coffee cup. To karma, and to actually reading the fine print. My life returned to normal. Better than normal, actually. Clearwater Estates became the kind of neighborhood people wanted to move to. Property values increased 15% in the year after Richard left. The community Facebook group went from daily complaints to photos of sunsets and birthday party invitations. I still practice law full-time, but I took on a new specialty: representing homeowners in HOA disputes. Word got around about what I'd done in Clearwater Estates. I get calls weekly from people dealing with HOA horror stories. I can't take every case, but I consult on dozens.
and I've made it my mission to train other attorneys on how HOA law actually works. Because here's the thing, most HOAs are fine. Most boards are well-meaning volunteers trying to maintain their community. But when you get a Richard Hoffman, someone who sees power instead of service, they can destroy lives. And most homeowners don't know they have rights, don't know how to fight back, don't know that most HOA threats are legally hollow. I do, and now I make sure others do too. 3 months ago, I got a letter, handwritten, from Elizabeth Kowalski, the woman who'd lost her home in 2021. She and her husband had used their settlement money to buy a new place in a different neighborhood. She sent me a photo of them on their new porch, smiling wider than I'd ever seen. Thank you for giving us our lives back. Thank you for standing up when no one else would. Thank you for being exactly the kind of lawyer we needed. That letter
Framed in my office now, right next to my law degree. Because that's what it's really about, isn't it? Not the billable hours or the impressive wins or the courtroom victories. It's about making things right when everything's gone wrong. Richard Hoffman's trial started last month. I testified for 3 hours about the bylaws, the procedures, the fraudulent fine scheme. The prosecution used my research as the foundation of their case. His attorney tried to argue that he was just being a strict enforcer, that he genuinely believed he was protecting property values. The jury didn't buy it. Guilty on 19 of 23 counts. Sentencing is next month, but the prosecutor thinks he'll get 8 to 12 years. 8 to 12 years in prison because he couldn't resist stealing from his neighbors and terrorizing people over mailbox paint colors and grass height. Carol Hendricks sent me an email last week. Just 2 sentences. I'm sorry I didn't stand up to him. Thank you for having the courage I didn't have. I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late, but I appreciated the acknowledgement. My favorite moment came last month at the community 4th of July party. The new board brought back the annual celebration that Richard had canceled 3 years ago because of liability concerns. 200 people. Bounce houses for kids, barbecue by the lake, fireworks at sunset. I was helping set up tables when a young couple approached me. Mid-30s, pushing a stroller with a sleeping toddler. Ms. Morrison, we just bought the house on Pinecrest Drive. We heard what you did. We heard this used to be a nightmare neighborhood, and you fixed it. We're grateful. This is exactly the kind of place we wanted to raise our daughter. That's when it hit me. It wasn't just about stopping Richard or getting justice for the people he'd hurt. It was about making sure future families didn't have to deal with his kind of tyranny. It was about creating the community we all deserved. As the sun set over Lake Mitchell that evening and fireworks exploded overhead, I looked around at my neighbors, laughing, relaxed, finally enjoying their homes without fear of violation notices or arbitrary fines. Kids running around with sparklers, music playing, the smell of grilled burgers drifting across the lawn. This is what an HOA should protect. Not Richard's ego, not his bank account, just people living their lives in the homes they worked hard to buy. Patreida found me near the dock as the finale started. She didn't say anything, just linked her arm through mine and watched the sky light up in red, white, and blue. You know, she said, after the last firework faded, I've lived here for 27 years. This is the happiest I've ever seen this neighborhood. Good, I said. That's how it should be. She squeezed my arm. You should run for permanent board president. I laughed. Absolutely not. I did my time, let someone else handle it. Fair enough. But you know they're naming the new pavilion after you, right? The board voted last week. The Jennifer Morrison Community Pavilion. I turned to stare at her. They're doing what? She grinned. You saved this neighborhood. They want everyone to remember. I didn't know what to say. Still don't, honestly. I just did what any lawyer should do when they see injustice. I read the documents, found the truth, made it right. But I'll admit, having a pavilion named after me is pretty cool. The pavilion dedication ceremony is next month. They're inviting all the families who received settlements, the new board, everyone who signed my petition. It's going to be a whole thing. My law firm is hosting a celebration too. I made partners 6 years ago, but this case, done entirely pro bono, has brought more positive publicity to the firm than any corporate deal ever could. We're launching a new community advocacy division specializing in HOA law and homeowner rights. I'll head it up while maintaining my real estate litigation practice. Turns out, standing up to bullies is good for business. Who knew? So, if you're dealing with an HOA nightmare, here's what I learned. Read everything. I mean everything. Every page of your CCNRs, bylaws, architectural guidelines, and amendments. HOAs love to claim they have authority they don't actually have. They love to issue fines that aren't legally enforceable. They rely on homeowners being too intimidated or too busy to fight back. Don't let them. Document everything. Keep records. Take photos. Save every letter, every email, every notice. Build your case before you need it. Know your rights. Most states have HOA laws that protect homeowners from the exact kind of abuse Richard polled. Many require hearing procedures before fines can be assessed. Many cap fine amounts. Many require specific procedures for liens and foreclosures. Your HOA has to follow these laws, even if they don't want to. And if you're really stuck, find a lawyer who knows HOA law. We exist. We're ready to help. Because nobody should lose their home over a mailbox paint color. As for me, I'm sitting on my dock right now, watching the sunset turn the lake into liquid gold. My $800,000 home is still mine, my community is peaceful, and Richard Hoffman is probably sitting in a county jail cell waiting for sentencing. Sometimes justice isn't just served. It's served with interest, penalties, and a side of public humiliation. And you know what? That's exactly how it should be. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA revenge and malicious compliance stories. Have your own HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments below. Your story might be featured in a future video. And remember, always read the fine print. You never know when you'll need it to take down a tyrant.